When crisis strikes and people become refugees, their lives can be torn apart. Jen Smyers oversees immigration and refugee policy at the Church World Service. I asked her to describe how families are affected and how people can help.
Absolutely, especially for refugee families who have endured prolonged refugee situations. Maybe they've been in a camp for a decade or longer, children who have been born in a camp situation or in urban situations where they were forced to work because they weren't able to go to school and their families couldn't find enough money to just keep the family fed and going. A lot of those family structures really suffer because of the displacement situations that they've endured, and I think a lot of times it's the suffering and the continued mourning of perhaps lost culture, lost time, lost education, lost opportunities in their country of origin. So there's a lot that refugees are facing that is very challenging, but there's also a bright resilience that they bring in terms of being able to rebuild their lives in a new place. And I think that a lot of refugees overcome those struggles because they are so resilient and so motivated to rebuild their lives.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Well, we've put together a graphic here showing the number of refugees coming from one country alone. We're talking about Syria here. Over the past decade, there were fewer than 20,000 refugees each year up until 2012. That year, the number of refugees jumped more than 3,500%, and it hasn't let up since. Talk to us about the incredible burden this places on both refugees and people like yourself working so hard to help them.
Well, you have refugee families who are internally displaced in Syria and who are trying to eke out an existence in Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, and beyond, and they're really struggling to do that. You're talking about camp conditions that are very, very difficult, even though there are some really innovative solutions like making sure that refugees can have vouchers so that they can buy the basic necessities for them and their families. But Syrian refugees who are in Jordan, who are in Lebanon, their children having to work just to eke out an existence. Lebanon is hosting 1.7 million Syrian refugees, which is the equivalent to about a third of the population of Lebanon. And Jordan as well, about 660,000 refugees from Syria. So it really, again, heightens the need as an international community for us to be helping Jordan, Lebanon, other host countries around the globe. In a different part of the world, in Tanzania, Tanzania has recently granted 200,000 refugees citizenship in Tanzania, which is really a mark of a best practice that other countries can take hold of. So again, there are these exciting best practices in a very devastating situation that we can learn from and try to utilize in the Syrian crisis as well.
And Jen, you mentioned Africa, but it's not just in Africa, it's in every corner of the world, the Middle East, Asia, Europe. Do you find countries are becoming more accepting perhaps in taking in these refugees? And what, in your opinion, is the greatest need right now to help these refugees?
I think you are seeing countries like Germany and others really open their arms to Syrian refugees in particular. Unfortunately, we're also seeing some countries really shirk from their international responsibilities and maybe some anti-refugee sentiment brewing in certain parts of the world. I think the greatest need is really twofold. It's for countries like the United States and others across the world to really open their doors and to welcome as many refugees as they can to match the growing global need. And the second piece is to make sure that those countries can extend some development assistance to countries who are hosting a large number of refugees, like you mentioned with the Syria crisis and beyond, making sure that we're holding countries accountable to keep their doors open to people who are fleeing and seeking safety, and making sure that we're helping those countries support their infrastructures so that they can continue to offer that welcome.
All right, Jen Smyers, thank you so much
For having me.